Well. The UFC is at it again, guys. They have officially released another ranked member of their heavyweight division in Martin Buday. First, it was Jairzinho Rozenstruik, and now Martin Buday. As a fan, you have to ask yourself that question of what did he do to deserve this? Like, why is the number 13 ranked heavyweight, Martin Buday, getting released off of a win over a debuting Marcus Buchecha? And I asked myself that same exact question. Here I've got Martin Buday right in front of his current UFC record, 7-1 in the organization. Now, granted, a lot of his wins were decisions. He does have a couple finishes at least. And when you consider that the heavyweight division is not the deepest of divisions, it's not like they're yearning for, replacements there, or maybe they are. What I wanted to talk about in this video is why I think the UFC ultimately released Martin Buday. Now, everything I'm going to say in this video, I want to make it very clear what my opinion is. I think that this was the wrong move by the UFC, and I think that Martin Buday should have been able to stay in the rankings at heavyweight and continue to put together some wins. Now, there's going to be opinions in here or just my thoughts of why the UFC made this decision. Ultimately, my first thinking behind this, and this is going to really just call out the UFC's boldness, knowing that they are the top tier and knowing that almost having a cockiness to it of like they're not worried about it, right? And what I mean by that is this information of Martin Buday being released, happened almost immediately after his fight at UFC Abu Dhabi on July 26th. And it had me thinking the other night, what do you guys think is coming up in the next few months here where the UFC wouldn't be worried about getting rid of a ranked talent? If you guessed Dana White's Contender Series, you are correct. So I did a little bit of research. Now, I didn't go full on researching, but I will say I counted at least 3 heavyweight bouts happening on different Contender Series cards this upcoming season for season 9. I literally think that the UFC has such a bold attitude these days in terms of like them being the cream of the crop, right? That they simply told Martin Buday, we're not like the biggest fan. It has to be driven from a few things. I think that one, it could be that he is clearly a certain style that the UFC might not be wanting for the heavyweight division. Obviously, he does have a lot more decisions in the UFC than he does finishes. Now, that is just an assumption. I don't think that should get someone to lose their gig, especially when they're as successful as Buday was. But I do think, knowing the UFC, knowing that they haven't always treated decision type fighters very well, in some cases, I think that is definitely a driving factor. And the fact that they have Contender Series coming up, they are literally probably thinking, we can just find a new guy. Find a new guy on the Contender Series that'll just fill in that space and be right back into the rankings, because the heavyweight division is just not very deep. Like, I don't even know how many fighters they actually have signed at heavyweight, but I'd imagine it's only, maybe 40, maybe. I don't know for sure, but that is my first point, is I think the UFC realizes, because of Contender Series and the amount of bouts they have lined up there, that they can likely just get new guys to recycle in here for cheaper, getting rid of Martin Buday, because I think right now he's probably had a pretty high paying contract with UFC, being that he was 7-1. But that's all just based off of, other things I've seen with fighters who are similar ranking and have similar wins in the UFC. Now, the other reasoning that I have thought of that would make the UFC maybe think about keeping Martin Buday or not keeping him is his close-knit relationship with current champ of the heavyweight division, Tom Aspinall. And knowing that Martin Buday trains with Tom Aspinall, I think that the UFC maybe looked at this situation and thought, even if Martin continues to have success, will he make it to the upper echelon of the division to make it a run for a title? But also, will he even fight Tom Aspinall if Tom Aspinall is the champ at that time. And I'm sure, I mean, he might, but I feel like they might not at the same time because they train together. So I think that that is going to be a big issue on the side of the UFC trying to decide whether or not he's worth keeping in the rankings at heavyweight. Like I said, guys, my opinion is that he should be able to stay with the amount of success that he's had. But another interesting factor that I'm going to show you guys in my next slide here is the rankings itself. And what I'm going to be showing you is the rankings that were posted on the UFC website on July 23rd. So only a few days before Martin Buday had his last fight in the UFC. And that is going to just outline a couple things for us. So as you guys can see here, I've got the UFC rankings for heavyweight pulled up. And this is from July 23rd, 2025. And as you can see, Martin Buday is coming in at the number 13 ranked fighter in the heavyweight division. And the one person above him is Mick Parkin. And so this is where I was going with this image of the rankings, is that not only does Martin Buday train with Tom Aspinall, but Mick Parkin is also another fighter from that camp that is training with Tom Aspinall. And I think the UFC may have looked at this like in a certain situation of, will Martin Buday and Mick Parkin actually even scrap together? Should that come up? And that might even be a matchup that they were looking to make. We don't really know for sure, but would he even be willing to, given that they train together? And guys, I don't think that that is like the telltale sign of the UFC just getting rid of Martin Buday, but I think it's a culmination of, you know, they have Contender Series coming up where I think they're very confident that they can just find new heavyweight talent that they can recycle and put into the UFC. And then I think it's the culmination of Tom Aspinall being in camp with these guys. And then you have another guy in the mix from that camp as well. I think the UFC might have just thought, you know what, 3's too many for this, and we're going to scrap one of them. And I think that from a business perspective, they probably looked at how much Mick Parkin is being paid to that of Martin Buday. I'd have to imagine Mick Parkin's not making the same amount as Martin Buday yet. From a fight contract perspective, now obviously you can't incorporate bonuses and stuff like that, but if you're just looking at salary for your show and win, then I guarantee you it's a numbers game. They just looked at it, said, you know what, Martin's making more, let's just cut him, which I disagree with, but it is the nature of this beast. The UFC is constantly getting rid of fighters, and guys, there's no rhyme or reason really. I mean, it's very interesting when we look at it because there's a lot of fighters who have had like extenuating circumstances or they've had extensive losing streaks, but still stay signed to the UFC. And I think that could all be tied to multiple factors, whether it be their personal relationship with the UFC brass, that always is going to help in any situation in life, having those relationships and being able to lean on that, but also perhaps a financial aspect to it as well. I think that they're probably considering all of those factors, but I feel like they aren't really considering how much fans will give a shit about this, because I think that they think no one gives a shit about Martin Buday. And to a certain extent, like fans probably aren't like, not a lot of fans are probably knowing Martin Buday and going to bat for him. But I will say, as a true fan of this sport, I want to see all the fighters eat. I want to see them be successful because it's my entertainment at the end of the day. And why would I want to wish bad on someone who is actually providing me a lot of entertainment, but also a lot of things that I can do personally in my life, like make content. I would never want to shit on them for that. And I think that the UFC really should start considering the fans a lot more, because if we were all to band together, if we were able to get a good group of folks together and just boycott, right? Like boycott watching or whatever, which I don't think would even work, then the UFC would have problems. So it's like, I think they should consider what fans truly want to see. And I think a lot of fans were really thrown off seeing that Martin Buday got released. I wanted to make a video about it, kind of outlining the things I think the UFC is probably thinking from a business standpoint here. But I also want to make it very clear that I do not agree with this decision. Like, I don't see how you can keep other guys who have a losing record in the UFC, but then Martin Buday not only has a winning record, but like out of 8 fights, he won 7. That is a high win percentage compared to loss percentage. So I don't understand how they keep other guys but drop him. But I think that as I try to make sense of this, I've boiled down a few of the things that I think lean into what ultimately drove the UFC to make this decision. Like I said, I don't agree with it. Comment below. What do you guys think about this situation? I would love to hear from you guys, so make sure you let me know in the comments below. And make sure you subscribe to Fight Feed if you aren't already, so you can stay on top of all the new MMA content that I'll be posting. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.